Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andrew Giovannini and I'm a character artist working in AAA games. So today I'm going to be bringing you a new tutorial for XGen and Unreal Engine 5. So in our last video, we gave a general overview of the process of setting up your XGen grooms in Maya. And although we mentioned it briefly in that last video, we didn't go into too much depth on actually setting up separate group IDs and custom hair guides for hair physics in UE5. And so we're going to rectify that process today in this 1 hour plus long video breaking down the process in great detail. And by learning this process, it should enable you to tackle a variety of different hairstyles and enable you to create cutting edge optimized simulations for your hair groups as well. And as far as I know, this is the first time you'll see this process documented and demonstrated online anywhere. And so if you appreciate tutorials like this, I just ask that you hit the subscribe button. And feel free to hit the bell notification button if you want to be notified as soon as more useful tutorials like this are released on the channel. And so for this tutorial, we are going to be demonstrating the process on the hair groom work of Malaki Corvin, who was the first person over in our Discord server to ask the question regarding this process. He was gracious enough to let us showcase and use his work for this demonstration. So do me a favor and check out his ArtStation. The link will be in the description below. Consider giving him a follow as well. And if you want to ask questions and chat with me directly, have access to all the scripts, useful tools, and links. The link to join our Discord server will be in the description below. It's totally free, and everyone is welcome to join. And so without further ado, let's get started. All right. So his question was, he was having issues setting up the hair physics in Unreal with the ponytails. So I'm going to show my approach to do that. I have a couple different ideas and approaches on how to do it. One involves having to kind of cut this into two separate pieces, but I think first I'm actually going to try a slightly different method first, and if that works, we might not even have to cut it. Transfer process, right? Interactive group editor. Okay. So at the top left here, he has everything pretty well organized, I think. We're just going to find his descriptions. Just like in our tutorial, we're just going to do one at a time. So, take that out. Convert to interactive group. Okay, yeah, looks like it matches it. And I'm pressing the letter G to repeat. And again. Again. I'm gonna go normal XGen. Okay. Just gonna hide all these. Off auto update. Make sure everything's hidden. So these look like these got a little noisy, right? So just like before, we should go through and rebuild everything. There you go. Okay. So first we'll export all of these, right? Generate cache, export cache. Settings look good. Export. Okay, save. Okay, now with that all set up, file. Okay, now we're going to import the Alembic cache. Okay, I cut the video to cut out the loading. We're going to now go through the process of setting this up. So I'm going to go ahead and hide all the major groups. So the first thing I need to do is kind of decide how I'm going to organize everything. So I think that's going to be one group, right? I'm going to break out the spline group manager, which again, in the Discord, you can grab this for free. Link will be in the description for that. I'm going to select these two pieces, refresh, pick the top one, spline group 0, rename that, pick it again, click reparent. All right, so that part's set up, should be. Yep, all right. Hide that. So we'll do the same thing with our fringe, right? And again, you don't have to unhide these. You can just leave them hidden if it speeds things up for you. And call that spline group 1, fringe description. Ready to go. Do basically these last pieces onto their own description too. Wisp, DESC. So we're gonna have our fringe, our ponytail, which is gonna be the two main ponytails, and the wisp, right? So the next thing we need to do is figure out how we're gonna set up our guides, because that's gonna determine how everything simulates, right? Let's go to our ponytail for starters, right? That's our ponytail description. I'm gonna select just one of these to become the guide for each side. We'll go here like this. Okay. Utilities, guides to curves. Yeah. So that's just for the ponytails, and we're gonna modify these. Okay. Next one is going to be for wisp, and we're just gonna pick all of them. All right. Pick curves. And then we're going to get our curves for the fringe, right? So for this, I'm just going to kind of pick them from the top. This one. And I'm just trying to get like a decent spread. And this is going to help us optimize better too. Longer pieces are usually better because I can catch stuff underneath too. Okay. Sure, we can include both of those. Do the same on that. Okay. So all of that is going to act as our guides. I'm just going to delete these first couple vertex. So select them, delete. I have made a backup. There we go. I'm going to open up GS Curve Tools. All right. I want always on top and curve highlight. So we're going to use this as our simulation guide. Okay. Same thing on this side. Oh. First. So I'm just trying to shape the guide so it sort of encompasses the center of this clump, like the whole ponytail. Yeah, and just moving things around, highlighting using a combination of the smooth here makes this pretty simple process. Okay. So we're just going to use these two guides to drive our two ponytails, basically. That's the idea. All right. And these four will drive all of these. And these guys will drive all of those clumps. So I think we're set on everything here. So we can call this Ponytail Wisp Guides Group. Fringe Group. Okay. Okay, I'm going to so one thing we need to do, if we look at the script from Epic that you use to tag your groom guides, this doesn't have anything that will tag your guides with a group, but we need to have a version of the script that basically tags it with groups too, the same way groups ID does. So groups ID, you enter the names of your groups, and then it iterates over each group. And right here is where it tags the group ID. So starting with this one, it tags it with 0, and then it goes up in number. So 0, 1, 2. It goes in that order, basically. So we need to take this sort of function and add it to this. So if we look at the XGen guidelines on the website, back to those scripts, right? If we come to our group IDs and we look at the code here, this is the piece that adds the group ID. So we need to take this to start with. I'm going to put it above the groom guide tag, right? And so for this to work, we can't use attribute name because attribute name is defined as group guide. So we just need to put define it directly like this. Just copy this groom group ID with the quotation marks, and then come over here. Instead of attribute name, we put that. So it's marked as groom group ID. So it's going to add attribute groom group ID. And so I'm going to name these first again. Ponytail guides. Yeah, we'll just do that. Ponytail guides. Wisp guides. Fringe guides. I think I need to rebuild these as make sure they're linear too. So curves, rebuild. It's going to keep it at 50. Make sure it's set to linear for your guides. Good. Otherwise, you're going to run into an issue when you export with Maya. Now going back to script editor, right? So under groom group ID, first I want to duplicate this and make a backup in case we messed up, right? And so with our guides backed up, we just want to delete 2 of them and have only one. We're going to run through each set of guides one at a time. So once we're done with that, once we run it through, we'll delete it, make a copy of the other one, reparent it. Basically click and control click, press P. You can rename them if you want, and then we'll run it through each one at a time, just like that. So this is going to be on the Discord. This is the updated script. Basically, this is for it's similar to the original, but we've added the ability to tag it with a group. So basically, you have to start with 0. So we'll start that at 0. Your first group's going to be 0. Second group's going to be 1. Third group's going to be 2, and you're just going to keep going until you're out of groups. And you want to go in the same order that you list them here for your Groom group ID. Now again, starting with the Ponytail guides, just to show you one more time. Duplicate. Place that under. So I'm going to start with our Ponytail guides, right? I'm going to start with under command attribute guides group, our default value. I'm going to set that to 0 for the first one. And then in order to avoid a naming conflict, we need to rename these. So I'm going to come up here. XG Groom. Actually, I'm just going to do Ponytail guides. Guide. Hit enter. With those highlighted, just rename both. We should be able to run this now. So, in those two Ponytail guides, right? So with that done, we can delete those. Let's do our Wisp. And I'll also name these Ponytail guides 0 to mark it as group 0. With our Wisp here, same thing. Let's just rename them. Okay. Oh, let's get our code again. So under, again, guides group, for this one, it'll be 1. So I'll mark that as 1. And that Wisp. That. Fringe. Duplicate. Parent. Same stuff. Guide. This one, I'm going to mark as number 2. So default value 2 under guides group. Okay. Guides 2. Cool. All right. Okay. Now, going in the same order, we need to do our descriptions. So now we're just going to run the script for this, the group ID stuff. Let's name them in the same order. So Fringe was 2. All right. Ponytail. And you can use the spline group manager if it's slow for you, but it's fine for me. So yeah, Ponytail was 0. Wisp was 1. Okay. So we're going to put those in the same order, basically. So spline group 0 is going to be Ponytail. Ponytail. Description. Number 1 will be Wisp. Description. 1. Fringe. Description. Go and just play this. Hopefully it works. Looks like we're good. Everything should be in the correct order. And just for completionist sake, we're going to also bake our root UVs. You're going to find that script here in that same page, right here. Again, you're going to have to add, which I already have here in my, under print, you're going to have to add these parentheses, these closing and opening parentheses. Otherwise, it's not going to work with the newer version of Python. And we'll need to go through each one at a time. I'm going to use the original here he has. So if we look at his original hair cap, let's check it out. Looks good. Yep, we're in map 1. Okay. I'm just going to delete this one for now. Okay, map 1. Right. Want to make sure. Check something. So I think you might have an issue if you don't freeze this first. So we need to come back here. Okay. So make sure you freeze transformations. Right. Orange description. Let me check this one more time too. Okay. So we're using this as our UV mesh. We're going to start with Ponytail again, actually. Capital T. Run this. Okay, cool. So now we'll do our wisp. 1. Okay. Now we'll do our fringe. 2. Okay. So now when we go into Unreal, it should export everything as separate groups, and we should be able to separately set up our physics. So pause here and then we'll come back when we set up. Okay, first, real quick, we'll go through the process of exporting. So I want to select all of our descriptions here that we've set up. I'm going to go to generate, cache, Olympic, export, our settings, current frame. We have our attributes here. Okay. Let's go ahead and export that. It'll be our UE5 version. UE5. Save. All right, so I made a new folder called Ponytail Demo. I'm going to import. Looks like our root UVs are good. We have 3 groups. Let's see. Guide count 26. That should be the fringe. Guide count 2. Sounds like the ponytail. Yeah, group 0. So group 0, group 2, group 1. This is the wisp. Guide count 4. So it looks like everything came in correctly. Let's import. Save all. Okay. Because he was working in ZF, my import settings are incorrect. So I believe this just needs to be 1. I'll keep these at 0. And I still think you need to put -1 here to flip it. Import. Save all. Now we're good. Now we're getting something. So go to our physics panel. We turn on Ponytail should be this group 0. So turn that on. So we're a little wacky right now. Turn our preload to 1. Start with. Okay. Let's also add, raise our collision radius. Okay. So you can see we're just like really stiff right now. So what I'm gonna do to start with, we're gonna click our stiffness here. So we're under group ID 1, or yeah, group 0. Under stiffness scale, we're gonna create new curve. And yeah, we want to stick this in this folder, and we're gonna name this ponytail stiffness curve. Save. So if we navigate to that, we can open this up. We're gonna get like this new graph editor. So right now it has these 2 points. We have our stiffness, bend stiffness at 0, right, for these top hairs. And what I'm gonna do is basically start by creating a slope. So this is effective from 0 to 1. So 0, y, 1 here. 1 here, 0's down here. It's a little confusing. So it's going across 1. And we're going to bring it down. No, not both of them. It's not to snap it. So I think the easiest way to do is select 1. And then under y, I can put 0.01 to start with. Let's see what that does. Right. Save that. Save that. Let's project too. Project. See, we're getting some movement now. Let's try raising our sub steps to start with. Okay. Let's turn off our invisible force. Oops. We're getting a little bit more movement, but it's not nearly enough yet. That helped fix some of that funkiness. So obviously it's still too stiff, right? So back to our curve. What I'm gonna do is just move this in. So we're gonna move this to 0.1. Basically, it'll more quickly start lowering the stiffness. And reset this. So now with the wind, it's having more effect, right? So now we're moving, but we have the issue. It's not staying where we want it to. Curve. So I'm gonna come over here, set this to let's put this at 0.2. Give us a little more space. I want to create a little bit more of a waterfall to it. Probably push this out more. 0.4. Maybe even 0.5. Do this. There. All right, cool. We might be in business. Let's see. So now they're staying pretty well within the these pieces. Ideally, you would have some movement there too, but I mean, sometimes you just got to work with what you have. Okay. So cool, right? Not bad, not bad. So there's obviously some funkiness going on here. So I'm going to show you the process of cutting it up too, to avoid that. So this is probably going to work the best, but I'm not totally happy with how some of this is reacting. I think for that reason, I would still split it. So turn that on too. Probably keep that at 0 for the gravity preload. Keep that at 5. Just kind of want to do a similar thing here. I'm just going to copy the same one. No, actually I won't. Let's make let's clear this. Create a new one. What I'll do is I'll set this base to 0.1. Wrong one. Zero's down here. We don't want it at 0 though. We want okay. I think we're okay. Okay. So you can see our guides, right? Get the idea. I think for the fringe, we are going to just use the kind of the same settings. I'll probably raise that to 10. To 10. I'm just going to crank that just to give it more stability. And then keep our preload at 0.5 for that. That's just what I'm going to try for now. Do whatever you think you feels best to you. Same stiffness scale as the wisp, I think is fine. Yeah. Let's see how that works for us. One more thing we can do. I think it would make more sense to have this flat. Okay. So the fringe is a little stiff looking. Maybe we can loosen it up, I think. Okay. Let's see how that works for us. Okay. So aside from like the noise we're getting here, this is working pretty well. So there's something causing that. It's hard to say for certain. It's only when I turn on the physics. Okay. Well, aside from that issue, depending on what you're doing, this should work for the most part. So I'm gonna show you how to do it with cutting up the ponytail next. So it's pretty good. It's not perfect, but you can see now we got some nice hair physics. That's one way to approach it if you don't want to cut it. But I think now I'm going to try a version where I cut the ponytail into separate descriptions. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so basically for the next part of the process, I pre-recorded the video, and I'm basically just going to talk through this. I basically just wanted to try something a little different this time. So we'll see how this works. So the first thing I'm doing here is basically organizing my scene a bit. I'm gonna duplicate the guides from the original base Ponytail and make some new groups. And just for the record here, I'm playing back this process at 400% speed. So it's 4 times the original speed. I think the process is straightforward enough that you should be able to still follow along though. So again, I've just duplicated the original guides for the Ponytail section, and I've added them to new groups. So to begin this process, we're selecting our guides, and then we're going to go and open up GS Curve Tools. And basically all we're doing to start this is to rebuild these guides to a high number like 50. And so with all those curves rebuilt, we use the lasso select to select all the CV points past the cutoff point, and we press the delete key to get rid of them. And we're going to do this on both sides. So again, we're just rebuild first, and then we use lasso select to select all the CV points beyond the hair tie basically, and then we press delete to get rid of them. So the next thing we do is use the selection slider in GS Curve Tools to select all the roots. And with some adjustments to the pivot rotation, we then use the scale to line up all those new roots, and then just move it towards our scalp like that. And then from here, I just decide to rebuild the curves one more time. And so basically what I end up doing is using the rebuild slider in GS Curve Tools to get it low enough to have a little bit more control over the shape of these roots. So now again, with reselecting all the roots, we use a combination of the scale tool and soft select to just get a bit more of a spread. And so from this point, this is a bit more of a straightforward but tedious process. We just go through and we kind of just work on getting a cleaner spread on the roots just to get more even density on the hair growth from the guides. And just keep in mind, like the placement of the root doesn't have to be perfect. It can float a little bit over or under the scalp. The guide will just attach to the closest surface point. And so from this point, I just make some few minor adjustments to these curves to just get them inside the ring that ties the pigtail together. And from this point, I'm just doing the same thing to the other ponytail. Same exact process. So it's not perfect, but I think it's good enough as a demonstration. At this point, I'm just trying to select all the inner curves and doing a spread that's separate from the outer curves on them. So again, just to reiterate, like the goal here is just to get an even spread because that affects how the density is applied per clump guide. And again, same thing, just making some minor adjustments to get all those guides inside the ring. And so now going back to our copy of the original growth cap, I'm just going to extract a new growth cap for each of the ponytails. And so with those pieces extracted from the scalp, I basically separate those into two separate meshes so I can create separate descriptions for each ponytail. And so then from here, we're going to create our first new description for ponytail left side. And like usual, we go to our utilities tab and we use the curves to guide function. And with our guides created from the curves, we're ready to start working with the modifiers for this. So starting with the setup in our primitives tab, we're gonna crank up the density to like 1,000 to start with, and it's gonna go even higher than that. And we'll have to, of course, raise our CV count as well so we can get those curve details in there. And I'm settling on 25 CV count for now. And of course, make sure to lower the width of your hairs. So we're starting with our first clumping layer and setting those to our guides as before. So for this video, we're going to move through the process of building up our modifiers and our description pretty quickly. But in the very near future, I'll put together another video outlining this process more carefully for you guys. I'll demonstrate and show you how to set up your modifiers and the mindset of the workflow as well. But for now, since this video is already long enough, we're just going to use a sped up process for this one. But if that's something you want to see in the near future, please consider subscribing and hit the bell icon so you can be notified when that video drops, which should be very soon. But for now, to begin with, we're starting with our first clumping layer, and we're setting up a random modifier in our clump to get some variation in those clumps. And we really take our time with our curve here as well. I like to create an aggressive slope in the beginning to get some early clumping. So being happy with the clumping and variation of the first layer, we start with our second clumping layer. So when I set up the maps for this second clumping layer, I try to make it 3 to 4 times more dense than the original. And with that in mind, I'm basically just eyeballing it from there, adjusting the density slider and hitting generate until I get something that feels about the right density I'm looking for. So this time with my clump scale curve, I'm just pulling in the endpoint to make the clumping more aggressive towards the root. And then for my second clumping layer, I also move to the noise effect and then set up a random modifier as well. And just like before, we move that endpoint to get a more aggressive effect towards the root. And on this one, I do it from the root point as well. So we can start the effect after the cutoff point that we want. And of course, the general purpose of this layer is just to create that extra breakup using the new clumping layer. So obviously this is nothing close to final. We're just trying to set up our clump layers right now. And again, the same principle applies to the next clumping layer, and where I want about 3 times the density from clumping layer 2 to clumping layer 3. And the same sort of workflow applies to this next layer as well to set it up initially. So at this point, I realize I need to make adjustments to my curve for the initial clumping layer to try to take into account that cutoff point where the hair binds with the band. So that's what I'm doing here. And so what I feel is that this just lets me get more aggressive with how I adjust the clumping earlier on. And it's also worth keeping in mind that we'll be able to fine tune this farther when we get into interactive groom. We'll be able to use our grooming brushes to really fine tune this. Also keep in mind, I didn't notice it at the time, but I was a little off with that dip in the slope. It should be moved forward a bit. Regardless, I just keep making these adjustments to our curves, both our noise and main clumping, until we get the basically the clumping we want for each layer. And again, I'll do a new video soon, more carefully explaining this process, but we just want to quickly go through it for this video. But again, we're just focusing on primarily our clumping and the noise for each clump layer. And we only apply noise to clumping layers 2 and 3. I ignore on 1 because that's primarily set up with our guides. And random modifiers expressions are a good way to basically get that clump variation in there too as well. So at this point, I start increasing the density just to see the effect of it. I type in, I think I go as far as high as 3000. And so from this point, we do start setting up our cut modifier with the random expression. But just keep in mind, I do end up moving it to the top of the stack here to get better results. And then finally, we're using a stray expression for our noise modifier because we only want to affect the stray hairs. We don't want to affect the main body. So again, to do that, you set the second value of the input to 0, and you only make changes to the first value here. And so you can see here the odd results we're getting. That's because the cut modifier needs to be on top for this to work properly. And so you can see there, now we're working well. And again, you set stray percentage in the description menu at the top of the XGen window. So at this point, we're just playing with keep parameter and reparameter for the cut to see how that affects things. And we're going to continue to adjust our frequency and magnitude for the strays. And continue to make adjustments to those curves as well to get really fine-tune things. And so this one final adjustment I decide to make, I decide to taper the tips towards the end of the noise modifiers in order to get cleaner, more pointy tips. To reiterate, it basically reduces the noise specifically towards the tips, and I'm doing this on all of our modifiers. And then after lots of adjustments, we go through each of our layers and make overall adjustments to our mask to adjust the strength of each clumping layer to get our final look. And again, also the density as well. Just keep making adjustments as you go along. And so for this final part, I'm not sure this will make a huge difference in Unreal, but I also try to add a very strong taper towards the root to help blend it into the rest of the hair that it's split from. But that's the only taper I add to my hair strands. And so for the next portion of this process, I'm going to use the interactive Groom version of the Ponytail original to just cut off the ponytail portion from the root section. But of course, before that, I decided I want to continue to make some adjustments with the original ponytail in there to see if I can blend it better with the curves. At some point here, we also turned on our lighting and shadows to get a better look at how this feels. But at this point, I add a sculpting layer into Interactive Groom into our original base ponytail. And we just used the cutting tool to cut the ponytail portion from this. It's very easy at this point. And again, just making final adjustments to our new ponytails that are split off to try and get a nice consistency in terms of the density going from the base to the new ponytail. And again, just continuing to make adjustments to our noise as well. You can also use that generator seed value to try and get different results that are kind of random. So from here, I'm just copying all the modifiers we just made so we can copy it over to the other side, to the other ponytail. That should make rebuilding it very quickly. So I want to confess, I run into a small issue here initially. You cannot save your descriptions for XGen as the same name as other objects in the scene. And I already have objects named Ponytail R. And I got lucky with the left side because I misspelled it by accident. But you need to create it as with a new name, basically, which I'll do here in a second. Because you can see nothing's getting generated. So basically, I just delete that description and redo it with the new name. At this point, we're just importing all of our same modifiers from the other ponytail and rebuilding all the clumping points as well. Starting with all the basic same setup stuff too. So again, going through each clumping layer and just redoing our setup maps. And all the clumping maps should all be set up the same already. You just have to click generate or guides for each layer. But you can see we got that very quickly rebuilt by comparison. And so at this point, there isn't a ton to say. We're just going through the same process of converting our new ponytails to interactive XGen so we can export it to Unreal, or at least start that process. But before we do that, I create new sculpting layers and our new interactive XGen descriptions so I can make those final adjustments and really fine tune those hairs and really get it into the ring for the ponytail. And one thing I want to point out as you watch me do this is I'm clicking and then pushing into the hairs with the comb tool. And you just want to work through it and check it from multiple angles. But this makes it simple and easy to make those adjustments. So at this point, we start the same process here with the other ponytail. We add modifier sculpt, and then we click edit, and then we start making those adjustments with the comb brush as well. So one thing I want to point out here is I like to use the freeze brush to basically highlight specific hairs, and if you use the reverse freeze functionality on the comb brush, you can control specific hair strands. And we're just trying to clean up using that same method with the freeze brush some of these stray hairs. And again, with invert freeze setup, we can just move those blue hairs. And I'm just pushing in from the edge, clicking and then pushing in. And I also turn off the invert to affect the other hairs as well. Invert freeze, I mean. Just take your time with this process. So we can see our final hair with split ponytail now. And basically, I just need to cut off one more piece for this breakup layer he has. Again, with the new sculpt layer on the this part of the groom. And we just use this cutting brush to cut it to the right size. Again, just one more time, we're just going to look at everything together. And I think it's pretty close to working, but I think we need to do one more sculpt layer and make some final adjustments to the base part of the groom. And basically, I'm just making some final adjustments to the wisp. I just want to pull them off the neck a bit. So at this point, we're just starting the process of exporting and then re-importing the grooms as curve splines. First, we're saving out that initial ponytail. And we get that imported in. And I also end up exporting and re-importing the portions of the groom that aren't part of the new ponytail as well, just so we can get everything fresh. But we are going to reuse the same guides we already set up, so we're going to skip that process this time. And again, just setting up our groups like we've shown before with the Spline Group Manager, which is, again, it's linked in the description to the Discord, so you can download that tool for free. So right at this point, I'm also exporting the fringe and the wisp as well. My main reason for doing this is because I want to run all the hair pieces through the group ID script at the same time, so to make sure everything gets assigned the proper number. And to be honest, technically we could make adjustments to the script too to do that, but this way is also valid, I think. So again, we're just assigning and setting up our groups with the Spline Group Manager. So we're going to copy paste our Spline Group ID stuff, and we're going to set up all our Spline Group IDs. For the first three, we're setting up the Ponytail, then the Wisp, and the Fringe, so that we have the same order as our guides. And then we're going to make the isolated body part of the ponytails, the part that's part of the scalp. We're going to put that as our fourth group, and that'll be assigned the last group. And so it won't export and be assigned any guides because we're just going to keep the physics turned off for the base. And then for this next part, we're just doing the same process of setting up our Groom UVs, which this isn't really part of this tutorial, but it's the same process as in our other video. We just need to go through each description one at a time. And so then from here, we're just going to start the process of exporting our Groom, updated Groom for Unreal. And we're going to include our original guides we already made too. And everything should match up in Unreal. Okay, so now we're just going to start by duplicating the original Groom in Unreal and re-importing it as a new file. And we're just here checking to make sure our guide numbers are matching our groups, and things ended up getting shifted around a little bit, but we'll fix it. So if we turn off the guides for this first group, you can see that's the body now, which is our new group. And it's just using generated guides because we didn't import guides with it. And so we have the guides for our fringe. And here I'm just testing to make sure it's applying to the right part of the hair. So basically, this is just going to come down to just adjusting all the settings to how we had it with the other Groom. And I think we should have better luck this time without a lot of the stray noise that was happening with the non-cut version of this hair Groom. So my original intention by copying, duplicating the original Groom, and then just re-importing as a new file was, I was hoping I wouldn't have to redo all the settings, but because the Grooms got reordered a bit, I have to basically shift everything down and rework everything a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. You just have to take your time working through it again. You can also always open up your other Groom and copy the settings that way too. This is also why it's useful to do external curves as well, because in that drop down you can just reselect the same curves you already set up, so it's not a big deal. You see that the new Groom doesn't have the same sporadic stray hairs issue. So you can see, and with some of the initial testing here, the ponytails ended up being a little stiff again with the original curves we had set up. They are working fine for sure, but we just need to make some minor adjustments to them. I did do some initial testing of the dampening too, but that didn't satisfy me. I ended up coming down to this curve, which we just had to make the slope a little bit more aggressive than what we had. And so I just moved that in to 0.5. And I think that fixes it. And yeah, it's worth noting there, I turned the simulation off and on. Sometimes you have to do that to apply the new curve settings. So we're just pushing it in a little bit more to make that slope a little bit more aggressive. And so this is the closest I've gotten to having a nice result. It's not perfect, and if you're doing this for a project, I would spend a little bit more time on it just to really nail it in, but I think this gets you like 90% of the way there. Adjusting damping is a good way to speed up or slow down how the hair reacts to forces like turning and everything. So higher dampening can slow down the movement a little bit if it's just moving too quickly. And just here's some final refinements to our curve, I guess. Just some final testing here. We're just about finished with this. And this is basically how you would set up a ponytail and Unreal Engine with hair physics. So I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. If you did find it helpful, please consider subscribing. I also have links to my Patreon in the description if you want to support this type of free education. There's no perks right now. It's just there if you want to support. These videos will remain free for you. And then, of course, there are links to the Discord in the description as well, where you can ask me questions directly on there. And you also have access to all of our free scripts and tools for Maya and XGen and all that. Yeah. If you found this useful, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to take the extra step and support free educational content like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link to that, along with the Discord, will be in the description below. Thank you so much.